Hey, what's up everybody? I'd like to introduce you to the star of today's show, the central nervous system music stand model, which will be instrumental here in teaching us the basic somatosensory and motor tracts of the central nervous system. So that is the goal of this video, is to take us through the DCML, the ALS, and the corticospinal tract with a visual representation here. So let's start out with the ALS, anterior lateral system, or I like to call it the spinal thalamic tract. And it is shown here, right here in red, and then with this red string here. So this red string represents the action of this, the axon of this pseudounipolar neuron. Hey little guy, boop boop boop, that's its cell body. And then here is the second axon projecting up through Lissauer's tract. Focus, come on. This axon will travel up one or two levels in Lissauer's tract before synapsing here in the substantia gelatinosa. So this would be where the second order neuron is. Then this second order neuron's axon will project across, notice that I have it coming across the front here, in the anterior white commissure of the cord before traveling up the spinal cord in the contralateral ALS. Alright? So notice where this is in relation to other structures in the cord. And you can see why we call it anterolateral. Anterolateral. Alright, so that makes sense. And then we go up straight, up here, through the cervical cord, the pyramidal decussation, so this would be the junction of the medulla and the spinal cord. And we get into the medulla, and we just keep going up, okay? So this is, I don't know if you can see this, but this is the lower medulla here, and it's still kind of anterolateral, alright? So here's a little red dot to show you where we are on the other side. I don't have one over here, but stays anterolateral here again in the caudal pons, and then in the rostral pons over here, and even up through the midbrain. Okay? So then we get here, synapses in the VPL of the thalamus, where this neuron sends off another axon through the posterior limb of the internal capsule to the corresponding part of the somatosensory homunculus on the precentral gyrus. And you feel pain and temperature wherever you're supposed to. At least that's our simplified neuroanatomical physiologic model of how things work. Alright, so that's the ALS. Coming down here, yellow here is the DCML, and you can see again we have an axon coming out. I'm not going to tap this one because it would probably fall off. The axon comes out here from the dorsal root ganglion and then sends its information up, only this time we're not crossing over in the spinal cord, we're just going straight up, and GF is the gracile fasciculus. So remember that gracile fasciculus takes information from the legs and travels medially, whereas the cuneate fasciculus takes information from the upper trunk and arm. So the separation between the two is at T6. And so I remember that the gracilis is a medial muscle of the leg, and so gracile fasciculus is medial and carries information from the leg. That helps me remember. And then I remember that the cuneate is the other one. And so you can see our axon is going up ipsilaterally here, through the cervical cord, and then we get to this junction of the cervical and cord and the medulla, so upper cervical, and we have a synapse with the gracile nucleus. Alright, so that's the second order neuron here. And the axon from the second order neuron then crosses over in the internal arcuate fibers, and then ascends in the contralateral medial lemniscus here through the entire brainstem. Up here, through the medial lemniscus. Here's the medial lemniscus in the pons in relation to some of the other structures. Right here in the midbrain. And then up into the third order neuron here, and again in the VPL of the thalamus. Hey little guy. Alright, and so then this thalamic neuron sends its axons again through the posterior limb of the internal capsule up to the precentral gyrus in the corresponding part of the somatosensory homunculus. Okay, so 3 neurons for the both of the sensory tracts. Now for the motor tract, which is here shown in brown, we're going to go back the other way. Alright, so this would be our upper motor neuron here, sending an axon down, again through the posterior limb of the internal capsule. And then this axon is going to pop out. Remember, thalamus is a sensory organ here, so we're going to skip the thalamus since we're talking about motor tracts. Blinded by the music stand. And again, we're going to follow this brown string, so ipsilaterally, down through the corticospinal section of the cerebral peduncle of the midbrain here. So the peduncles are what make Mickey Mouse, would give the Mickey Mouse's ears in the midbrain here. And so this brown string is going to go through corticospinal. Remember, these other ones are for corticobulbar, so that's for the cranial nerves, and frontopontine. It's a little dusty, sorry there. So it's probably not clinically relevant or important to memorize which part of the peduncle carries which fibers, but just know that all of these are carried in the peduncle. That's a little too specific, honestly. But the corticospinal fibers here in the peduncle, and then we descend down through the anterior part of the, again, here's rostral pons here, so corticospinal tract in the rostral pons. And then in the caudal pons here, now we have the pyramids here because they kind of stick out. And then pyramids, I don't actually know if that's why they're called pyramids. I think grossly they look like kind of pyramidal structures. And so then in the medulla here, again, and then here the ultra important pyramidal decussation, very prominent feature in the upper cervical cord / lower medulla here. And so here's where this upper motor neuron's axon is going to cross over to the other side, and it's going to drop down in the corticospinal tract, lateral corticospinal tract over here. Alright, so now in the spinal cord, it'll be running contralateral to the side that it started, all the way down here through the lateral corticospinal tract, and synapse here on this anterior horn cell. And then this anterior horn cell is going to send out its axon here to innervate whatever the motor unit is that it is assigned to. Okay? And so that would be coming not from the precentral gyrus up here, but from the postcentral gyrus. So even though I have it shown as kind of the same location for the yellow DCML fiber and the brown corticospinal tract fiber, that's just for convenience here, so don't be fooled. Alright, so hopefully this will help you localize some lesions and make it a little bit easier to picture in your head. So for example, if I were to place a lesion right here in the cord, this would be cervical spinal cord, I would lose pain and temperature sensation. You can travel down and see. Follow this fiber back. I'd lose pain and temperature from over here, so on the contralateral side, and I'd lose motor function going down to the ipsilateral side. So when you see that pattern, and then I would also lose, if I affected over here, if the lesion was just localized here, I would have unaffected proprioception and deep vibration. If the lesion included this area as well, I'd have deep vibration proprioceptive deficits, which would also be ipsilateral. So when you see that pattern of alternating deficits, that helps you localize the lesion. And then again up here in the brainstem, where we have these alternating hemiplegias, we can knock out corticospinal tract here, medial lemniscus, anterior lateral system, depending on where the lesion is. And this again gives a clue to the lesion.